fences make good neighbors. So you've heard that? But Robert Frost's poem, The Mending Wall, is really a charming story about how two neighbors meet each year to walk the fence between them and repair the damage done by time. You see a lot of fences in our world, but not a lot of fence mending. Hi, I'm Lori Johns. In this episode of Chop Talk, we're talking about neighbor relations between pig farmers and their neighbors who may not farm or understand it completely. You know, one of the best gifts my late grandmother gave me was an embroidered saying which hangs in my office even to this day. It says, "Let me live in the house by the side of the road and be a friend to man." It was written in 1897 by Sam Walter Foss, and a lot of people knew that saying in Grandma Gladys's day. They stitched it, hung it on their walls, and they lived it in rural Iowa. The older I get, the more I realize how much we could all learn from that old poem. I was moved when I found some Northwest Iowa pig farmers who may or may not have that little ditty hanging on their wall, but they definitely know how to be a good neighbor. And it takes more than fence walking to make it last. So how do good neighbor relations begin? I sat down with Kody Havens, a field specialist with the Coalition to Support Iowa Farmers. That's a nonprofit, non-lobbying group whose mission is to keep livestock farming sustainable in Iowa. A big part of that is encouraging positive neighbor relations. Kody is the guy who travels the state working with and advising Iowa livestock farmers on how to best do that. Recently, I got him off the road long enough to have a chat to see how it's done. So what's the first thing you do then when you go off to, let's say, a pig farm that wants to put in a new barn? Where do you begin?
Yeah, so they'll call in and they'll kind of explain to us what they're wanting to do, whether they're trying to expand or build new, what kind of style of production they're doing. So we'll just get a little bit of information from them, but there's not a lot we can do until we go out and meet with the farmer and shake hands with them and kind of look at their operation. And then once we do that, we have a checklist of things we kind of go down through. We oversee the soil type, where water sources are, location of neighbors is huge, and just making sure that the position of the farm is going to work out in a rules and regulations standpoint, but also being a good farmer and taking care of the land the way they need to.
And those neighbors do have questions, whether they've been there all along or maybe they're new to the area. So where do you start when it comes to that?
Yeah, the big thing that we push is just making sure you're open and you go and speak with them and let them know what's going on and keeping them informed. The last thing you want to do is just go do something and then they find out just by driving by one day. So keeping a good relation with them, meeting them, and then explaining what your plans are, the time that you're going to do it, and then kind of the steps that you're going to go about doing it, and just keeping them informed and in the loop and making sure they understand that you are doing the things you need to be good to the environment, a good steward of the land, and just making sure that they're aware of all the steps that are being taken to do that.
How important is neighbor relations when it comes to successful construction or a successful pig farm?
Oh, I think it's huge. It's very, very important. And the biggest thing is just making sure we stay connected with them and that they understand that the steward of the land and of the animals, so that way they know that everything we're doing is for the best interest of the animals. So I think being a good neighbor makes all the difference. You
know, because it's kind of tough out there when sometimes there are folks who would call a lawyer before they call their neighbor and go, "What's going on here?" And the lawyer's not from there and really doesn't care. They just want to stop everything.
Oh, absolutely. And kind of skipping that step and really just being friends and neighbors and keeping the consumers connected with the producers and where their food's coming from is huge too.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about today's pig farming?
I think the biggest misconception is that the producers don't necessarily have the animal's best interest. I think the biggest misconception could be that we're just looking at it as a way to make money and produce as much profit as we can, or as farmers can. And that's not the case. The biggest thing is producers really do care about the animal, and that's when the animal's going to be the most productive, is when they're the healthiest, most comfortable, least stressed. So I think that's the biggest misconception. And all we've got to do is tell the story, because the story is good, and producers do have good stories, and what they don't hear is the disconnect.
Right. And, you know, one of them concerns manure, of course. So if you're talking about neighbor relations and a guy's got a new barn and he's got a neighbor who's got questions, well, how that whole big manure picture come into hand? What do you advise them?
Yeah, absolutely. And the manure is very valuable to the farmer. So the last thing they want to do is run it off into the road ditch or into a water source. They really want to utilize it. That's a big value to them, is using it as fertilizer to grow the feed that feeds the animal. And so getting it into the ground correctly and getting it in proper is in the best interest of the farmer.
Yeah, and if that neighbor has got a graduation party coming up, if you stay in touch with them regularly, maybe you know not to put the manure on the day before, right?
Absolutely, yep. We definitely advise that for producers that go over and knock on that neighbor's door door and ask them if they have anything coming up or if they have any events. We even hear of neighbors that if there's sometimes there is a little bit of smell when they spread, they'll pay for a hotel room for that neighbor for them to have a weekend getaway at a big city or something like that, just so that way it alleviates some of that.
And another thing the coalition encourages for livestock farmers is tree planting. They've helped farmers plant more than 80,000 trees since their Green Farmstead program began in 2009. That makes this old master gardener smile. But I know that trees are not just beautiful, they're practical on a livestock farm.
Help with as wind breaks and the odor control and aesthetics of the land. So that one's really big for us. And if there's any farmers or anything like that listen and would be interested in that program, they can feel free to reach out to the coalition. We can help them work through that.
Of course, it takes more than trees to make neighbors happy. It takes good conservation practices, too. And when you live really close to land where manure is regularly applied, like Mike Schmitt does, it takes something more. Mike doesn't farm, but his house in Leicester is a stone's throw away from farmland that is regularly fertilized with liquid gold. And that cornfield is about 50 feet from your house. So you'd know it.
Yes.
You'd smell it.
Yes.
If there's something going on.
And they're real conscientious, even like when they spray, that the wind's in the right direction so it doesn't affect the gardens of the people in town. So they always wait. They'll have a west wind.
Well, that makes sense because, like I said, between the vegetables and the things you're growing, it take a lot of work. And you got kids playing outside. I saw a huge jungle gym kind of thing right over there, and I'm thinking kids wouldn't like that if they're going to smell it. If they're not familiar with what it should be.
Their farms are terraced, and they do conservation, like try and do as minimum amount of tillage as they can, to keep erosion down. And their manure application is all knifed in. This always gets covered with manure, but right behind us, and you don't really smell it.
So if it's managed well, it's not like a 24/7 thing.
No. Just when the tractor and tank goes by, you might smell a little bit, but when they're done with the field, you don't smell anything.
So tell me, with that in mind, how important it is, how things are done to keep things all copacetic with the neighbors.
Yeah, because with the size of the hog barns now, there's anywhere from 12 to 5,000 head in a barn, and you can imagine that many animals eating. That takes a lot of feed, so there's a lot of trucks got to go in and out with feed, on a regular basis, and then also hauling them to market, bringing the little ones in and haul them to market. So there's a lot of jobs. The feed company, the truck drivers, there's just a lot of jobs that I know living this close in this corner of the state. Livestock is huge. And you see the towns are just bustling with people. You got your implement dealers, you got your electricians. There's construction is just continually going on, and I really notice a lot when we do work down in Sioux Center. There's just you go to the pizza ranch for dinner, you got to go early, otherwise it's just full. There's so many construction going and workers working in the barns, cattle barns, hog barns, chicken barns, all that, dairy barns. It just employs a lot of people.
So this is a town that lives on livestock.
Right.
On agriculture.
Yep, northwest Iowa, Lyon, Sioux County. Yeah, it's just unbelievable.
Well, like you say, it has changed a lot. And I see this picture from your wife's late father with the horses pulling the equipment, the ancient equipment from long ago. It all used to be horse-drawn, and things have changed so much. And the towns have changed with it, and so have expectations.
Yeah. There's a lot of risk. Anymore, like building a barn and spending $1 million laying out there, and then you hope everything works out. But you have to take the risk, otherwise you fall behind.
Just like everyone who lives in Leicester, Iowa, Mike knows Idle Knot Farms, the Mosers who run it, and the impact they have in the surrounding communities for those who don't farm. So tell me how Idle Knot contributes to the community. A lot of stuff going on.
Larchwood had their family days here a couple weeks ago, and Idle Knot furnished the pulled pork. They fed 1,300 and some people. For free, they furnished it. They furnished the meat, and then the co-op and the bank kind of went together to help serve it or whatever. I think he did 60 butts, smoked them.
Smoked pork butts. Somebody spent a lot of time.
Yeah, he spent all night. He got up every 2 hours just to make sure the smoker was going, to make sure it was ready at noon on Saturday. Rick actually served on the school board. When his kids were in school, he served on the school board of Westland.
Wow. And then are the kids, then there's sports and there's coaching
Yes,
and there's
yes.
church and there's,
Yeah, yep,
I can't even imagine.
yeah, yep.
You know, it is a beautiful spot and the success grows and hinges on livestock.
Right, yeah. I think these small communities in Iowa, I think, are great places to live.
Mike talks a lot about the Mosers and the 40 other local pig farmers who raise about 200,000 pigs a year for Idle Knot Farms. I had to ask Rick Moser and his nephew Tyler what neighbor relations mean to them when everyone knows their fence rows are so long they can't be walked in a day.
Well, it's I'd say it's very culturally accepted in this area, whether it's dairy, pork, beef, and there's a lot of people interested in working either in agriculture or in supporting industries. So it's just kind of part of the community in this area.
Well, you grow up around it, you know, you really do. And not everybody does, you know, maybe, you know, sometimes what we're seeing, which has happened in the last couple of decades maybe, but in certain parts of the state more than others, where folks move out to the country and it's their first experience out in the country. And they discover one day, most of the days they don't have any sense of it, but then all of a sudden they might smell manure and now they got issues and they've got questions. So some of those farmers who might find themselves in that situation, they've got neighbors who are new to the area. How important is neighbor relations when it comes to farming, no matter what your size of your operation? What would be your advice?
Yes, it usually isn't the first owner of that house that is the issue. It's when they get a job transfer and they put the house on the market and somebody else wants to live in the country or live on an acreage and they come out there. A lot of times the first owner knows what he's getting into. Not always, but most of the time. But my advice either way would be to go over, meet them people, get to know them, not just act like you care, but really care about their life. You know, if you can invite them over for, you know, pork chops or hamburgers with bacon or whatever, just extend a little rural hospitality to them, see what their interest level is in ag, try to educate them a little bit. If they want to see pigs, try and get them in a barn. Be proactive instead of just waiting until there's an issue and then having to deal with it. And sometimes then it's a crap shot whether you're going to be successful or not.
Right.
Well, if you want to go build a hog barn in some location, and the first time that you meet somebody, that's your conversation, that's probably not off to a good start. I mean, it's a lot better to have some groundwork of a relationship laid before that. I support what Rick said, and then just to add to it is that, I mean, sometimes it's just like the little things, you know, you stop on the road and talk to people, or things like, you know, we would have associated with what our grandparents did 50 years ago that make people feel more of a rural community. You know, if they need help moving some snow or just little things, you know, that don't really cost anything, but it helps. And then we try to, if there's kids or children, you know, high schoolers in the area, if they want, you know, to help sort some pigs to make a little money or vaccinate or wash trucks, you know, we try to find those relationships. I mean, we put as much value in just having that relationship with them and then indirectly with their parents.
I had a grandpa one time hit me up in the hardware store, wanted to know how his grandson was doing sorting pigs. He was so proud that his grandson was sorting pigs for our farm. It was really cool. And, you know, kind of floored me, but yeah, people like to be part of successful operations. You just need to lay the groundwork.
One other thing that we've kind of been doing more recently is we always try to support community events, whether it's like the town picnic after the parade or local fair stuff. And it's not just giving some money and having your name on a sign. It's if you're there to actually serve the food and help cook it and stuff. And people ain't to remember that, you know, it's like, hey, those are the people that, you know, served at this event, or they provided and they actually served the food. And I think that comes back more than you think, that people remember that. And then you're starting with maybe a positive opinion instead of a negative opinion. I don't know. I kind of enjoy doing that.
It's part of the social license to operate.
Yeah, tell folks what that means. What is a social license to operate?
So you try and be a really good neighbor and do everything correctly, that to the best of your ability, that you would like your neighbor to do right outside your front door. And you do what you can, but once in a while you're going to drag mud out on the road. I mean, you're going to spread manure, and it might stink for a day or two out of the year. When you're close to that person's premises, stop in and check with them. Make sure they're not planning a backyard barbecue that evening or night that you're going to be out there. Maybe she won't hang clothes out on the line or whatever. Just those little things, and do the best you can, but also you can't be 100% perfect to what a city dweller might expect. There's going to be a few hiccups in there, but I think the previous relationship is a huge thing. Just know that no matter how good you do, it may not be good enough for everybody.
Yeah, you can't please everybody all the time, everywhere. But like you said, it's like everybody's doing the best they can, and you're receptive if they've got questions.
Try and have a little money in the bank with them before figuratively speaking, ahead of time.
Yeah, the goodwill. Have that goodwill banked up, because if they've got questions, you're like, well, yeah, but I know Rick and Tyler, so, I'll just call them up. They're cool. I'll ask them about that, or we're going to have your grandma's celebration out in the backyard next week, and I want to make sure maybe they're not going to spread manure that day or the day before, something like that,
Yep.
If you decide to move out to the country and don't farm, it may surprise you to know that you don't have to resort to fence row walking to learn about the men and women who farm the land next door. Today's innovative pig farmers want to answer your questions. They pride themselves on neighbor relations because they know that's what it takes to ensure the value of agriculture to everyone. Now, on the next Chop Talk, speaking of priceless, how about harnessing the power of the sun? Solar power for Iowa pig farms. Yep, it's a thing. How popular is it, and how does it work on those farms? I'm Lori Johns. A bright, shiny future on the next Chop Talk.